Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's time that we start. It's 3:15, so academic 15 minutes is over. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to eTwinning Contact Seminar, Active Learning and Teaching through eTwinning. My name is Ivana Banković from eTwinning National Support Service in Serbia, and I would really like to welcome everyone to our first eTwinning Contact Seminar. Serbia is in eTwinning since 2015, and we are very happy to have, until now, 180 registered users. So here today we have teachers from 15 different European countries, and we are happy to see everyone so interested in eTwinning today. Without further ado, I would like to open the seminar and start with our program today. Today we will have plenary sessions only, and tomorrow we will have group work sessions where we will develop ideas for eTwinning projects. So first of all, I would like to invite Director of the Foundation Tempus, Ms. Marija Filipović Ožegović, to address you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It is a great pleasure for me to be here today, and I would like to welcome you also from my side to the eTwinning Contact Seminar in Belgrade. I hope first of the contact seminars that we are going to organize together with you, with your national support services in Belgrade, in Serbia. For my country, this is really a very important moment. In 2017, we had for the first time the opportunity to fund projects that involve schools in the Erasmus+. Serbia, unfortunately, was not able to participate in Comenius, and all these nice projects that you are used to are new for our teachers. So we are really looking forward to working more with the European countries and more having international exchange of best practices, problems, solutions for problems in the eTwinning, but also within the framework of the Erasmus+. For us, active teaching is still a puzzle in a way. It is implemented very well in some schools by some teachers, but not so well by everyone. I do not know whether this is the context of your countries as well. I know that some European experiences are better, some are worse. Since you are all interested in eTwinning, you are not among those teachers who are not willing to implement active teaching. That's obvious, because eTwinning is very interactive as such. But still, since the concept of the active teaching and motivating pupils, putting them into the center of the learning process, is something that when I started to deal with education some 15 or 20 years ago was maybe more a word that was used by politicians in education and professionals, but not so much supported by everyday's work, by budgets, by the number of pupils in the class. And very often when these things were discussed in these days, many years back then, the teachers used to say, how can I provide active teaching for a class with 30 or more pupils? So it was in a way almost impossible. Not impossible, but very difficult to do. Now there are classes that do not have any more 30 pupils or more, less, at least in Serbia, in many schools. In some, unfortunately, still the conditions are not much better than they used to be. But it is up to what we want to do. And with this eTwinning seminar, we would really like to discuss with you the concept, and I hope that through the working groups there will be the exchange of ideas. How do you see specific problems in the subjects you teach, in the lessons that you teach? How maybe some things that are not very interesting for kids can be overcome with eTwinning, but also through the active teaching and learning. At the end, I hope that we will have more projects together in eTwinning and Erasmus+ in general, because it would be a very nice thing to go further from this contact seminar and beyond, and maybe to use all these tools that we have in front of us. eTwinning is one of them, definitely maybe the most easy to start with, and to work more closely together in order to really have an output that we could be proud of. We remain at your disposal throughout the seminar. My colleagues from the National Support Service that is hosted by our organization, and also other colleagues from our organization that will be here to support the organization of the seminar for any kind of assistance that we can provide. And of course, if you have any comments or suggestions on how to improve the program of the seminar and how to make it better, more useful for you, please be free to do so. I would also like to thank the National Support Services that had confidence in the organization of the seminar in Belgrade to send the teachers and to propose to the teachers to come. I would like to thank these colleagues who are here today with us for the assistance and their goodwill to cooperate with Serbia. Thank you very much, and I wish you a fruitful seminar.
Thank you. Now I would like to invite Ms. Jelena Jakovljević to address us and to talk to us about enhancing active teaching and learning with ICT. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Jelena Joksimović, and I am here as a researcher, mainly in a field of active teaching and learning. I am working on my PhD thesis at Faculty of Philosophy, University of Belgrade. I also work in Education Forum, which is kind of a think tank organization that is dealing with active teaching and learning in Serbia for almost 3 decades now. I would like to share with you what are my sort of plugins in ICT world. Firstly, my thesis is development of software which is going to be used as a classroom observation tool to assess quality of teaching and learning. It is completely based on socio-cultural theory of Vygotsky and also socio-constructivist theory, which is almost the most dominant paradigm today in education. And because of this work on my thesis, some people at my faculty told me that it is not an educationalist job to develop a software, and this should not be a thesis defended at Faculty of Philosophy. Then I was thinking and thinking, so I changed the title of my thesis, but I'm working basically the same thing still. But it is my way to show some sort of protest also for this really not so multidisciplinary work in our fields. In education, we know that this multidisciplinarity is a necessity. Today, we have ICT to help us in that. And if we, in education, are developing anything, of course, we are going to collaborate with others, especially engineers in ICT. So my thesis will be and is at this moment developed with many wonderful people from ICT, but of course with psychologists as well. I'm thinking that it's not mine anymore, it's ours, but that's also one, I would say, additional value. First, I would like, that was my first plugin actually. The second plugin was the project that I was working on past years, and it's called Children Make project. This project we worked with Swedish Institute, Interactive Institute from Göteborg and Swedish Embassy, and with one NGO here from Belgrade. It's called C31, and what we did in Children Make project, we tried to combine participation, children rights, and maker movement with art and expressing some of their stories. We worked with children aged 9 to 11, and we worked on developing small projects that would help these children express their stories through some sort of technology that is very open-ended and that is very iterative, meaning that we used a lot of Play-Doh, different types of conductive materials, but then programming something and actually merging virtual and real world. It was mind-blowing for me, it was mind-blowing for our entire team, but it was mind-blowing for the kids, and that was the most important, because as soon as they would come into this, what we called collaboratories, they would just start experimenting and using all these materials, and it stopped being a tool for education, it started being real material, so you could never know what is going to be the conclusion. At this point, we are writing an article about this project because it was parallel research. Of course, we from academia, we cannot do anything if it's not research-based, but not just research-based, but if we do not withdraw some scientific conclusions from it, and I don't think it's a bad. Now I would like to explain a bit more about this title of my presentation. It says Enhancing Active Teaching and Learning with ICT. With the very purpose, I made this title this way because I think we have too many articles, too many talks, and even too many projects going other way around, saying how can we use ICT in education or how can we use ICT in teaching and learning. I don't think it's a good way to do it, because I think education should be the one asking the questions and ICT should be the one maybe offering the answers, or the both should construct the answers together. But as you know, today we have a lot of companies and a lot of interest is on the side of ICT. And education is a very huge market. So the companies would come and say, we have solutions from your problems, but wait, that's not our problem. But I think it can be solved with this one of our solutions. And then the companies come, enter the schools, and actually start to dominate the field, because there is a lot of power in it, and there is a lot of money, as you know. I think, and I quote often one sociologist of education called Michael Apple. He said, education should not serve the role in the society. Education is a society. And it is a core part of society. So those questions should be also asked by education. That's also something that Sharon Todd, another researcher in field of education, is arguing about, saying that we should come not only to ICT, but to our governments, to our ministries, saying these problems we face in education, and this is how we think it should be solved, and then being solved together. It is, of course, hard in our all. I don't know, we come from diverse countries today in this room, but I could speak for Balkan. We come from countries that Ministry of Education has really low funding, maybe almost the lowest besides culture. Yeah, that's interesting twist. In our countries, because it really reflects how powerful we can be inside of education. I think we should change this power dynamics soon. This would be the outline of my presentation. Most of it I said, but this is like more precise. Firstly, I would like to speak what I think is active teaching and learning, and what we can find in literacy about it in different kind of research. Then I would like to compare the nature of active teaching and learning with the nature of ICT. I think it's really important in the end to talk something about misconceptions about using ICT in education, and to finish in an optimistic way about these promises of enhancing education with ICT. Now I would like, it is hard, and Ivana also mentioned it before, with the large groups to do completely interactive sessions. So I would make my best effort to from this point on, for this session to be interactive. So my first question to you would be, how many of you had some sort of training in active teaching and learning? You can just raise your hands. Okay. And how many of you heard before or were involved in some sort of maker moment sessions, maker moment fairs, or been to maker spaces? Okay. In any moment of my presentation, I invite you to interrupt me and to ask to tell me to slow down or whatever you feel like. If something is not clear, yeah, please let me know, because sometimes I would not see from all of your faces how are we going on. Okay. This joke by Seymour Papert explains a lot. I would say explains a very core of active teaching and learning. It says, I think it's an exaggeration, but there is a lot of truth in saying that when you go to school, the trauma, he uses this word, is that you must stop learning and you must now accept being taught. Meaning that very majority of us, when we stand like I'm standing here, I see mostly a light on me, and that is a bad thing. And students are not there to listen to the teacher or to absorb what teacher is saying. The students and teachers are there to co-construct, to together make new meanings. And this is really a good reflection about traditional school. Traditional school says teacher is the one who preaches. Teacher is the one who stands in front of the class, usually in a very silent class, and he is the one or she is the one who talks majority of the class. Here we see two things. One is predominance of verbal in traditional school, and the other one, the key role of teacher. I would say that in active teaching learning, we tried to overcome this and to develop it in a way where the student is in a focus. So this is completely student, learner, or learning-centered environment, where everything that is planned to be and that is implemented in class is actually firstly saw from the eyes of the students, and then actually not everything could be even planned in that case, but the power is also shared in the classroom. It's not all in the teacher's hand. As I mentioned before, Educational Forum is an institution or is an organization that was developing active teaching learning here many years ago, and until now we are having this huge network of schools in Serbia, in Montenegro, in Bosnia, with instructors that are spreading the word and that are doing, so they had some training in active teaching and learning, and now they're giving trainings to some other professionals. This means that this was developed firstly like a project, but now is more like a movement, I would say. And this project was developed by three of my professors. One is Professor Ivić, other is Professor Ana Pešikan, and third is Slobodanka Antić. Some of them you probably heard of. The background of the active teaching and learning was found, as I mentioned before, in socio-constructivist paradigm. This paradigm is predominant today, and I would say these are I just took some of the key points from this paradigm that comes as presumptions of active teaching and learning. This is how we see teaching and learning as active. So the first characteristic of active teaching and learning is interactivity, meaning that all the changes that happen in us, and we know that in a very baseline of changes of learning is a change. So is something, some input, some development of this input inside us, and the output, which is a change. This was argued by Vygotsky. We heard, you know about Vygotsky, Piaget, and this school of thought. So interactivity was mainly Vygotsky's, but it was developed with many others afterwards. And active co-construction was something that made, Piaget talked about construction and saying that everything that we learn, everything that we know is built up on some baselines, on some pillars. Those pillars or those our previous knowledge and everything that we have with us is something that we start with, and then we develop the knowledge more. Core construction is more modern, I would say, than Piaget's. And it says that this construction could not be done alone. It is always in interaction with somebody else. Sometimes in a school we call it adult partner, probably most often teacher, but sometimes it's also a peer who is a bit more advanced in some aspects of this lesson, of this class, or whatever. Coming from this is also knowledge dependence. We see active learning and teaching or real learning and teaching always as dependent on what we previously know, meaning that whatever I'm talking now is going to be different, or whatever we are discussing will come differently in all of our minds, because somebody had some sort of experience with active teaching and learning, some other different, and we will take those stepping stones to build up on it. In the classroom, that means that each child comes with a very, very different background, comes with a very different knowledge, and if we do not build on it, we are working a very hard job, maybe even impossible, to learn something. I usually mention this anecdote from one school here in Belgrade that had one Roma student who was not doing very well in classroom, and especially he was very bad in maths. Actually, if you see his grades, you would see it's all 111, which is the lowest grade here. And a researcher came and asked this teacher, did he made any progress? Do you know anything about it? Because you see 2 semesters are almost over, and he's always on the same point. Does any development happen here? And she said, oh yeah, he did a very good job from the beginning till now. Okay, but how can he know that, or how can anyone else know that with this same mark? And she said, but this is not for grade 2, you know, for mark 2. This is still a very bottom level. Okay, and then the researcher asked, okay, what is the problem with maths and this child? And the teacher said, when we put this, when we write, he's really slow in writing, so he cannot write down the task. And if he writes down the task, then he doesn't really know which number is which, and that kind of stuff. And the researcher, there was a hidden agenda behind this conversation. The researcher saw the child begging on the street a few days before. And the researcher knew that this child is very good in dealing with money. So if you give him any bills or you give him any coins, he will do the perfectly hard mathematical task. But in the classroom, it was decontextualized. And this teacher she wasn't aware of enormous previous knowledge that this child had, and how to use it in the classroom. So this child actually could do much better if his previous knowledge was taken into account. I would say this is a story I use it for knowledge dependence here, but it's a story about many different aspects in our classroom. But it also says something that was from this Pappert's quote from the beginning, that seeing our students actually as they are. The next point is metacognition. I am a psychologist, and we in psychology talk a lot about metacognition. But I would say in the learning, it's a precondition. It's something you cannot do it without. Meaning that our awareness of the learning process is extremely important for our learning outcomes. Also, learning is content dependent. I believe we all know that, because if we teach maths, some sort different methods could be used than using in language, using in biology on different fields. So content dependent, meaning that different mental tools will be used in different subjects, different sciences, or different areas, fields of knowledge, but also if you go more into details, meaning that if you are a teacher of mathematics, you are also a representative of the entire mathematics community to your students, meaning that you are going to transfer how the mathematicians act, do, what are their beliefs, and everything, and this is also part of the learning process. Then we have social nature of learning. This also comes from Vygotsky, saying that all learning or mental functions come from their to become internalized must be interpersonal, or must be at least some kind of interaction with persons, for example, built in our textbooks and built in our other teaching materials. Also, we say that learning is nomothetic and ideographic at the same time. This is a huge challenge for all of us. Nomothetic meaning you cannot teach some integrals to third graders, but meaning that maybe there is some very, very proficient, very good third grader that is very, very he's a prodigy or something like that, or she, and very good in math, and maybe for this person you can develop a different part of curriculum. So you will always need to balance in your classroom between what your group needs to know, what your outcomes are preset from the ministry or any other agency, and what specific children can learn more faster or slower. Last one is also Vygotsky, saying that education is seen as artificial development. That means actually that if you prevent somebody to be educated, you are not preventing it for being part of the system, you're preventing this person to develop. This is a strong point, or a very important one, I would say, because it says that if we see education as artificial development, as Vygotsky put it, meaning that this is an organized system with preset aims, with preset tools to get to these aims, you are having some groups or some individuals inside the system, you are responsible for the system as well for these individuals. From these aspects, I go to ICT and active teaching learning, and first I have a question for you. Did you hear before about this study of Hall and Cushing? When film came in, and they thought it would be an amazing educational tool, and everything could be filmed, captured, and then recorded and played, and teachers would become kind of how do you call these people in the cinema just playing these records, preset materials. So they did this study asking, actually having 3 parallel groups and the control group with a controlled amount of content. They were learning how to use this micrometer, and the first group learned it through lecturing, the second group watched the film, and the third group read some written materials. So the content amount of content is same in all 3 groups. And the question was, which group learned the most? So who would say that A is the group that learned the most through lecturing? You can raise your hand. Okay, 2, 3, 4. Okay, thank you. Then who would say that this group that watched the film did the best? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, okay. Reading books. So little trust in books. Okay, film is winning. Anyone who has some answer for D? Active learning? Okay. Okay. They didn't have this group, so I'm just asking you to develop more on this. So active learning. Any other guessing what were their results because they didn't have active learning? Yes, please? You mean that would be the better method? Okay. But do you have any guesses how these results of this study actually showed? What did the results showed? So some of you said this. Some of you, majority of you said it's film. Some of you said C. Is it possible that some other, because they didn't imply active teaching learning, I would say yes. If they did, that would be the best method. But they didn't imply it. So with this, they actually got the result that there is no difference. Yeah. It was a tricky question, I know. I have me to blame here. I used this with my colleague from, that was another plugin in ICT world. I teach at the faculty and we use Moodle. Some of you use Moodle? Yeah. So we use Moodle a lot, and there is my colleague there from Faculty of Medicine here in Belgrade. He is one of the developers in Moodle, and he uses also this task always, but he doesn't even offer this D. And I said, that's nasty, that's mean, because the real result of this study was that there was no difference. Coming to ICT, because film is not very advanced ICT, we do not have any proof that using ICT in classrooms will enhance our learning and teaching. This is some of the studies, but you can find it a lot more. It is hard to find correlation between using ICT and better learning outcomes. Why is this happening? I think because it is when a good teacher is a good teacher, and there is no tool that can ruin the good teaching, or there is no rule that can there is no tool that can overcome if somebody is not a very good teacher. But we'll come to that later again. This I also use. This is an exam question in one of the tests that I give to the students at my faculty, and the question is which of these illustrations, A or B, illustrates active teaching and learning, and which illustrates traditional. And there is no right or wrong answer, as you could imagine. I wouldn't ever argue something. You would say A? Why? Can you explain your answer? You would say A is active. No, A is traditional. Okay? That is the most frequent answer in this test as well. It's a good one. I do not say any of these answers are good. It depends on the argumentation. So if you said this is traditional because book is closed, one very good argument, then it's all stick like it's very, very hard knowledge. Actually, I took these photos on one of the exhibitions here in the Museum of Applied Arts, and I do not believe that these authors meant this usage of it, but it ended up as a very handy educational tool. The other one more associates to ICT, right? And all of my students would always say, this is active teaching learning, just because you have open book and there's wires and the wires connected to the brain. And then I would say, really? You think,
recalling the film that is shown there, and they were like robots.
Yes, exactly.
So this could be something traditional.
Exactly, exactly.
There's an association between the film and what
Yes. I usually play this devil's attorney, and then I say this could be also a robot that is just served with specific amount of information and took it uncritically. Yeah, that was also your point. And that's of course the matter with pictures. You can read it in many different ways. But it's why I put it here. Because I wanted to say that it is easy to think that only because we use ICT, something is active. Or only if we use ICT, something is more interactive. It doesn't necessarily. Using PowerPoints is, if you all use PowerPoints and we use it enormously, but it is a really chalk and board with with little less effort, with little less time spent on the class. So this tool doesn't provide the interactivity of your class. But what we are facing with, and which is easy to overcome with ICT, is this, one of the discourses in education. Students would say boring, studying is hard and boring, and we all face low motivation among our students. The other part is that schools will not bring you a very bright future because, as we see, many of these now it's very popular to say Steve Jobs, or I don't recall which of those very successful people never finished any sort of college or something like that. So we are facing with all these discourses of negativity in education. And what we see in this negativity, and I would say what is important to emphasize, one is, and of course one very strong is that schools are obsolete, and that this movie, very short clip about this trial to the school, and so everything changed, see how the phones are changed, the cars are changed, but the school is the same. Well, knowledge is the same. And not in an amount, not in an information, but the way how we learn is very much the same, because our brains didn't evolve too much. But what we do in schools and what we actually invented in this humanities educational field is, I would say, much more modern, much less obsolete than some of the things that we found in ICT. But never mind, I wouldn't fight between these two, never. I would just say that this is a presumption that makes it easier to justify your choices about ICT, saying that it will raise motivation, and it certainly will, especially in the beginning, and it is very contextual. This is, yes. This I wanted to go back to. So it's social nature of learning. If you say social nature of learning, and Vygotsky also said, that this means that learning should be in a context. So if everything else in the world is relying on ICT, it is completely out of logic to learn without relying on it. It also means, of course, that you can use these tools to enhance socializing or interactions between children. And then another important aspect that I mentioned before was interactivity. And we all know that with ICT, interactivity could be enhanced in many different ways, but mostly it could be instantly interactive, something that you make. This is an illustration of one of those projects from Children Make I mentioned before. So this boy developed a video game about collecting garbage. So it was ecological team, and this signs on the floor were connected to different controllers inside the computer. So he would stand on X if he wanted to go right or left, and right. His shoes were also covered with these conductive materials. So he did the programming, of course, with the help of an engineer, but he had this ownership about it. And this was, in the end, one very successful project showing how you can interact with, this is real reality, yeah? And on the screen, you would see, and all the other children could see how the changes happen. So the boy on the screen collects the garbage, and this boy is controlling its movement. I was once in a very lively discussion between my Professor Ivić that I mentioned before and the one software engineer that I'm working with in one company here in Serbia. And the guy from the company was always saying interactivity. And Professor Ivić was also using the same word. But they were talking about completely different things. And that was a very interesting moment when I saw Professor Ivić is a psychologist, developmental psychologist. He's one of the best readers of Vygotsky. And he was using interactivity as something that is between people and something that is making you internalize some knowledge, some information, some mental function. The engineer was of course, he was talking about pressing the button and something happens. So the interactivity in ICT world would be you press something, you touch something, and something happens. In this more sociological, educational way, interactivity is way more. And I was a mediator here, so I needed to explain to both of them that they are using the same word, but not in the same manner. Meaning that we could use a lot of enhancement for mental interactivity from the ICT. Co-construction, that is easy. I not need to spend more time of it. You know, this kind of networking, this kind of information gathering is very easy when you have a lot of actors. In education we usually have it, and you can enhance cooperation between children here, children somewhere else. In a web quest, once I heard about the project that 5 kids one was from China, one was from USA, one was from Europe, and one was from Africa. They actually used these time zones and the difference in time to have more time to work on their project. It was amazing. In the end, they made a biology project that was very popular. And they used, of course, internet to connect, to share what they did, and to build up on it. That's just one how can I say, one very simple use of internet and one very simple aspect that is actually showing how we co-construct meaning easier when we can network faster, and that's where the ICT helps. But also there is a term called scaffolding. You heard of it? Scaffolding or scaffolding, how do you, okay, when podupiranje or supporting, yeah. So it's also easier when you have a lot of data, and in ICT help us collect a lot of data about our learning, help teachers collect a lot of data about their practice. So I know how many students, I can do a lot of interactions between my data to know this year I gave this kind of test and they did it in this percentage, for example. This was the weakest point, this was the weakest question. Of course, a lot of administrative work that all of us as teachers work is also easily overcome with ICT, but I would say that is a side effect. The main effect is if you have all this data, you can drive this co-construction more precisely. For metacognition as well, this data could be used, and this data could help us self-regulate our learning. But this screen is familiar to you or not? Some of you? Scratch, yeah. We use Scratch recently for children coding. It is very child-friendly. But what is most important here, I think, about coding and learning and metacognition, coding in itself has very narrow steps needed to be explained in order for your code to work. So here you have, when click this, something happens. When this and this, it will invite this. It will make this interaction. So you need to say, if I don't know, in this project there is just a simple walk through these meadows, and it's a very nice one. Actually, I can maybe show it. This is connected, right?
It should be.
Okay. So I thought about using Scratch in many different aspects. Scratch, Codable, or many other softwares for developing your own softwares. And in working with children here, they needed to rethink the process of their learning in a very small steps, in a very explained way. This is demanding metacognitive activity, I would say. It's not easy, but and it also, never mind, this will take too much. And it also helps them to understand this process better. So if I want to code that this cat goes right or left, I need to know what kind of controllers would make this cat go in that direction. And if something is not working, I go through entire code and say, okay, maybe here is the problem. And if I want to hear the sound when the cat goes left or right, again, this code should be aligned with the code of going right, and it should not collide. However, making these algorithms is extraordinary metacognitive activity, and I would say very useful for learning. Learning about learning, but also learning about coding or whatever you're coding about. Explained us. This is another project. I put it this because I think I look pretty in this picture, of course. No, the girl is in focus. She made this instrument, musical instrument of bottle. It's called botulta or flashuta in Serbian. So we programmed, she recorded several different sounds. And we programmed that one sound is connected to one of these buttons on the bottle, and the other sound on different, so she could push it and play a different type of music, if you can call it music, but it in the end it was. So the buttons are similar like this, and are made of Play-Doh and this conductive tape, so electricity goes through it. We used some makey and different sort of very cool gadgets, and her learning needs were maybe you see, maybe not, but she has some developmental difficulties, and her learning needs were matched very well in this project because it was something that is driving her. So she really likes sounds. She was in the spotlight. She really liked that, but she really liked the process behind it. So it was from the idea, I want to play an instrument, and I do not how to play. I cannot play some complicated instruments like real piano or something like that. Let me try with this, and that was her instrument. I think this was a very good example of how ICT actually helped us match her specific needs. I would ask you now to say if you agree, you put your hand like this. If you disagree, you put your hand like this. If you do not know or are just ambiguous about something, you do not need to raise hand or anything. I will display several teasers, several sentences. So the first one is active learning and teaching feels risky. Disagreeing, okay. I would say it a bit feels. Can you explain your position, why you disagree strongly? Because you raise it. Some of you in this line, I cannot see your name, sorry.
I can't see why would it be feel risky. Why would it be risky at all? Any approach.
Can somebody from this side that raised this hand argue? Yes, if you are still there. Maybe sometimes, please.
Might feel risky because I'm fearing that I'm not going to fulfill the program. Because it always goes
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're not sure you're going to get there.
Mm-hmm.
To children.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It
It might not be, but it feels.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Especially in this aspect of nomothetic ideographic balance, yeah. Sometimes feel it's risky because you do not have so much time. It requires a lot of time. And in the huge classrooms, it's also risky. I do not have answer. I just wanted to provoke to think about it. Yes, maybe sometimes it's hard, but I would always argue, let's try to use it. The second is, in active learning and teaching, students participate actively, while the teacher might take a more passive role. Who would say it's? Who would disagree? Who would say? Okay, majority of disagreements. Very good. Any of you want to share with us? Why?
Because as a teacher, you have to lead.
Lead, yes. I would say that is one of the reasons. What else? What does this leading mean inside? Yes, please?
Giving instructions.
Giving instructions. Planning those instructions. That's killing job, yeah. I know. Controlling, I would always use some different word. Not really control. Facilitating, very, very good. Yeah. We agree on it. Mostly. Glad to hear that. I would never say it's more passive. And in psychology, no mental process is passive. You're always active, even when you sleep. So there is just a small one phase during sleep when you are a bit more passive. Now we come to this. Information is knowledge. Agree? Disagree? Can you please tell us? You raised your hand first. That's not the hierarchy, okay. It's the process. So information is part of knowledge, but not the knowledge. Very important and very easy to mix when we come to talk ICT and school. ICT is just another tool. This is agree. Okay, I would add this. Not using it just as tool, because if we use it just as tool, it will construct our practice. But if we use it as a material, then we can change even it. Meaning, that is why I talked a lot about coding. So it's not just to use it to produce something, it's to make another tool of this tool. Another software from this software. Another, I don't know, another computer from this computer, because my computer maybe is not very adjusted to people who do not see very well, and then I will make these large letters to help them, or something like that, to customize it. ICT can replace teachers? No. You heard about Tony Bates, I guess. Tony Bates said the teacher who can be replaced by a computer should be replaced. And I stand with that completely. With some of these misconceptions I already dealt with. So we should not think that ICT in education is just equipping schools with computers. It's often said by our ministries, it's often said like that. Just send them computers with a lot of support, I would always say, in school. Information is not knowledge, as colleague explained. And what I have as a doubt, as a fear, is something that I put in this one of the last slides, is saying what peoples, what cultures, what languages will take control of these new educational industries and impose them to the world. I would say this is Attali wrote a lot about, he was a skeptic in using ICT in education. He didn't argue against, but he said that French government should be very careful with implying it. This I put here because just when I came here from another conference about ICT, it's called Enter, and it's for women in ICT. And one woman was talking about education and ICT, and I saw again, she is engineer, and I saw again a lot of blind spots in her understanding of education. And of course, she works on this kind of position, saying that she controls a big data sets, and they collect a lot of data in UK about education. They collect a lot of data from schools, and then they read this data and they send it to schools. My question to her was, okay, what kind of theory comes behind collecting of this data, and what kind of theory comes in reading it? It's not so easy, and it's a space for a huge misuse. So I would always say we should see who and how is implying ICT in education. I would say it's a great space for enhancement, but again, to be careful with. The greatest space for enhancement I see in maker movement, and I would say that maker spaces are indeed genuinely learning spaces. Maker movement is a movement that invented 3D printers. They say no to consumeristic approach to the world, and they would say we can make everything we need. We make it with using technology. We make it with using STEM, so sciences, natural sciences, and lastly, they make it using some crafts coming from previous time, but also some of the crafts that art people have. So I would always say that making and using ICT is the best way, and it also really goes well with Dewey's learning by doing. Learning by making, we say in this. It is a revolution. It is slowly coming to our schools. A lot of our schools here also, one big project starts with robotics, with using ICT in computer science classrooms. So it's slowly moving, but I think it's where the future of education is. So I broke my time with 10 minutes, sorry, but I hope that there is some space for questions.
Yes,
if there. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, and please ask. If anything wasn't clear, or if I blind spot something. Maker moment? Yes, gladly. So I think that now in USA, some in Northern Europe also, we have a lot of teachers involved in maker movement, and I think it's great. But before, it was the field for engineers, mostly. People who wanted to share their knowledge about some sort of software, some sort of technologies, and their knowledge was how to, for example, make some new product, something that is really contextualized, something that is really customized. For example, a friend of mine who is maker from Sweden, his son broke one of his toys and said, buy me another one. And he said, no, let's go to workshop and make this piece for this tool. So that's the mindset behind it. We make, we do not buy. Of course, some of these materials need to be bought, but for example, with 3D printers, you know how this industries of making things is going to be very different. So you make this online, or you make this design in your computer, and then you connect it with a 3D printer, and it makes it. Some argue that new human organs could be printed that way. It also changes. You have a little computers that have just one software in it. We used one of that called Raspberry Pi. So it's like this. It's very cheap. You can order it online, and you have just one software. But with this software, you can make other softwares. And anything that you put in this computer actually would be your creation, your software, your result. So you can make a software that, I don't know, controls your electricity in the house or something like that. Different. It's a long story. you can, of course, find it online. But I would say these are the main presumptions that were important to explain. Libraries recently become a lot of maker spaces. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry for taking your time too much.
Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. We will have a short 20-minute break now, but before I would like to give you an important information. When you come back, please take the headset for the translation because the next presentation will be in Serbian. Thank you.